here. So there might be a couple people jump on, but I will go ahead and get started. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting, I was actually wondering if maybe we could say our own names this time, just like we would in the library, and give everybody a chance to unmute. So I'll just start, and I guess I can call on people if they don't chime in. I'm Allie.
You knew that was going to happen, right?
Mike.
Just, yeah.
I see Doug.
Hello.
I heard Sandy.
Brian Day, Emerald Ridge.
Hi, Brian, Emerald Ridge.
Joe Four,
Mike.
Highlands.
Hi, Joe.
Mike Kunkel, Corey Farm.
Tom Loach, John and Gap.
Thanks. And I live near Mid Springs. I didn't say that before. And then we've got Jenny Moore. Hi. And our staff members present. I see Carolyn Schaefer, Charles Rapp, Rachel Falkenstein, and Tori Kanopoulos. What else do I have to say? The person responsible for receiving public comment are the Crozate Community Advisory Committee. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. And that's it. So we're still missing some people. Making sure I said everybody's here. Looks like it. But I guess we have enough to go ahead and approve the minutes. If everybody had a chance to look at Joe's minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so everybody will vote in favor of approving the minutes. Say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Objections? Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about a few, mostly parks and conservation, but I think maybe Rachel had some other bits to recap before that. So I guess I can hand it over to you guys.
Sure, thanks, Allie. Tori's going to go ahead and share her screen. While she does that, I wanted to just check in quickly about the land use topics that we've been going back and forth on over the past couple months and have had a lot of conversation on. I just wanted to share that we heard your frustrations and concerns from last time, and that you felt we misrepresented or didn't accurately represent the feedback, or that we weren't listening. I just want to share or kind of reiterate that it was never our intention to do that, to misrepresent, you know, all the work that you all did or discount that work. We do appreciate, and we have heard your concerns and feedback. So I wanted to share that we're making some adjustments to the land use plan based on the feedback that you all shared and the conversation we had with the Planning Commission. And we're planning to share that back with you at your March meeting. You may recall last time we said we were going to the board in March, but we felt that rather than rushing to the board and not giving you all an opportunity for us to share that updated land use recommendations with you before the board, that we would push that back a month. So our new plan is to go to the board in April, an April 7th work session with them. And that will allow us to come back to the CAC in March at your March 10th meeting to talk about land use again. And our hope is that we can get the land use recommendations to you all in advance of that meeting and plenty of time so that you have an opportunity to see it, read through it. We'll be pulling all of the land use content together in a draft chapter for you all to review. And then we'll walk through at the next meeting kind of our process for how we develop the recommendations and how we took all the feedback into consideration. So that's kind of an updated scheduling thing for you all that I wanted to share before we got into the content for tonight's meeting. So moving forward to parks and conservation, Tori, if you go to the next slide. So a couple housekeeping things on this content tonight. Similar to last, we've put the maps up for the parks and green systems maps on the CAC calendar page. Allie sent that out in the link that she emailed. If you don't have that, you can just go to albemarle.org and search the calendar and go to today's date and you'll find the link there. So that will allow you to, if you want to pull it up and follow along, you can zoom in because I know some of the maps at this scale is difficult to see when we're screen sharing. So I just wanted to share that. And then also just to say, these are pretty preliminary initial recommendations we're sharing with you all tonight. Give you an opportunity to get a first look at it, ask questions, share some initial feedback, point out red flags, and then we'll do what we did with the transportation content and put all of the questions and the content up on public input with questionnaires for you all to fill out and to share with neighbors and community members as well. So that's kind of the plan with this content, to move it along the process. And we have kind of three main topics we'll get through tonight. The first is just coming back to some didn't quite finished last time, the Trailhead network. Tori's going to start us off. And then we have Tim Padalino with us, and he's going to go through some of the recommendations about parks and ways. And then lastly, we're going to touch on some natural resources preservation content and go through a couple recommendations for that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tori to do the follow-up on the trail, shared use path, and bike lanes.
Thanks, Rachel, and good evening, everyone. So we're going to jump back to the end of the last meeting on January 27th and wrap up our discussion of trails, shared use paths, and bike lanes and those connectivity maps. So just a quick recap, after our last meeting, we left off talking about bike and pedestrian connectivity, and we reviewed draft maps of the future bike and pedestrian connections, and also talked about existing sidewalks and then areas we heard for top priorities for installing new sidewalks. And since that meeting, the public input page has been set up and active. And so far there have been 73 participants and 568 views. And this page is still open for feedback. And so I'm just going to go through and cover a feedback summary so far. So just a reminder, this is the connectivity map that was shared at the last CAC meeting and is on the public input page, showing the future shared use paths, trails, and bike lanes connections. And we asked for feedback on where to prioritize future connections. So what we've heard so far is that the highest priority east-west connection would be a trail connecting Crozate Avenue, Meadows, Brownsville Elementary, Henley Middle School, and Old Trail. And then for the priority north-south connections, Crozate Avenue shared use path was the highest priority, then followed by the Crozate Avenue bike lane on the northern portion of Crozate Avenue, and then Eastern Avenue to Route 250. And throughout the comments, there was a lot of feedback too about the importance of providing bike and pedestrian connectivity along both routes 240 and 250. And then this map also shows the rural shared roads that we discussed, Jarman's Gap West, Mint Springs, Crozate Avenue North, and then Three Notched to the east. And the rural shared road, as a reminder, would allow bicyclists to continue to ride on the road, either within the travel lane or the shoulder, but bicyclists' conditions could be improved, such as improving with wider shoulders or adding signage. And so far, we've heard that the highest priority area to look at for improving a rural shared road would be the western portion of Jarman's Gap. We also heard throughout the comments, not just in this section, but throughout the transportation feedback so far, the importance of connecting to Mint Springs Park. There's also a mix of feedback with a preference from some respondents to keep rural roads as rural in character as possible, but also concerns trying to balance that with safety of cyclists and pedestrians and the potential need to widen areas for their safety. We also went over the map of existing and approved sidewalks. So sidewalks that already exist, and then ones that will be built with new development, such as with Pleasant Green or with connecting to the square. And the top priorities we had heard were Park Road, Crozate Avenue, Hilltop, and High Street. And so far with our feedback, we've heard that on public input, Park Road was ranked as the highest priority, and then Crozate Avenue is a very close second. There's also been a lot of comments about the need for crosswalks and enhanced sidewalk connectivity, especially at Crozate Avenue, 3 Notched, and then at Tabor. And then also a need for connectivity along Route 240, especially to allow people to be able to walk to Music Today and Star Hill. So we'll go ahead and pause here and see if you all have any additional discussion on this topic and on these priorities. Just a reminder, the public input page will still be open for feedback. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing.
Thanks, Tori. Hi, Sean. You missed introductions. Hi, Josh. That was great. I see Brian has a hand. Hey.
Just a quick comment, and that is I wanted to provide some more support for the connection between downtown and the Plaza and Crozate Park. And the Hilltop, High Street, so forth, would do some of that. And because we know that downtown is likely to develop faster than the parking to keep up with it, and because you've already got sidewalks along Hilltop, but they're unusable, but you've got the right of way for most of that already there, or at least there is an asphalt sidewalk there that, like I say, little kids can't even ride a bike on, but it exists. So supporting that and having people be able to connect from downtown to Crozate Park and use it for auxiliary parking in the interim, because we know infrastructure won't keep up, would be a highly wise thing to do.
Thanks, Brian. Anne, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I will just pass along what I heard by phone during the last week, which, and people are studying this, which is really great. But both people said regarding the Hilltop sidewalk, nobody can use it because if you try to use it, you trip and fall down. And lots of old people have fallen down. And so it is a liability problem. And I don't know to whom to give that. So I'll just leave it with staff and they can figure out where to put it on which list. Because as you say, the right of way is there and hopefully it could easily be ripped up and re-asphalt down there. Thank you.
Cool. People were probably mad that I said that. It wasn't a priority of mine. But that makes sense. Yeah, I think those projects reflect what I've heard are important. So thanks. I don't see any more hands up, but again, if anybody in the attendees has a comment, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. So
Brian Day has his hand up.
I think, Brian, did you have more to say? I think it was, he already spoke.
I'm good.
Thanks. Okay, are we ready to move on to parks then? Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for this content. All right. Okay, so before we turn it over to Tim to talk about parks, I just wanted a refresher on some of the work we've done so far about establishing or updating the guiding principles. And on your screen right now is the draft guiding principle we have for this chapter of the master plan. So it really talks about not just parks, but also the green system, the natural resources, and just connecting to the surrounding rural areas and the importance of that for the community. And then we've established a couple of draft goals. The first one is about parks and continuing developing those opportunities. The second is about trails and greenway, connectivity to parks and other centers with trails. And the third is about that connectivity to the surrounding area, the mountains and the national parks and the rural and regional amenities around Crozate. And then lastly, the natural resources through sustainable and restorative site design practices. So we've had some previous engagement on these topics. This is just a summary slide. If you remember way back to fall 2019, we had some in-person engagement. One of those was a connectivity tour where a group took a jaunt bus around and looked at some opportunities for trail connectivity. So we folded some of that feedback in, but we've had also since then several virtual workshops and online questionnaires about some of this content. And then a little bit, there's a little bit of overlap with some of this content, especially relating to trails, with some of the transportation workshops and conversations we've had. So we've pulled up all of that content together to help develop these drafts that we're sharing with you all tonight. But before we get into that, I wanted to share just some of the themes that have come out of that. We've heard pretty resoundingly that Western Park is a priority of the community, and the community is really anxious to see that project move forward and carried forward in this master plan. Secondly, the importance of Crozate Connector Trail and really upgrading the status of that to provide kind of a spine of connectivity throughout the center of Crozate and connecting to other amenities around. And then that there are currently some obstacles in the community to connectivity, and we've already started to talk about some of that tonight, some of the sidewalks that need to be improved or streets that don't have sidewalks. And then lastly, kind of our natural resources themes we've heard is the importance of stream health in the community. You have, a nice network of streams that run throughout Crozate, that a lot of the trails align with the streams. And so the importance of keeping those resources preserved and protected with buffers and trees and canopy in those topics. So we've carried those forward in our recommendations, but before we get into detail on what we're proposing, we thought we'd start with kind of a check-in of what's in the 2010 plan and how we'll carry some of that content forward in the 2020 plan. So with that, I'm turning it over now to Tim to take us from here.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and thanks, Community Advisory Committee, for having me. I'll do my best to provide some information and some vision and some updates and answer your questions either now or as a follow-up as may be necessary. This is the existing Parks and Green Systems Plan from the 2010 Master Plan. As Rachel said, we wanted to reference this and identify what some of the priority implementation projects were from this plan. I think we can go to the next slide, please. And just as highlights, one of the priority implementation projects was the Greenway connections, including connections between downtown Crozate and schools and parks. One of the highlights there is the trail connection from Old Trail to Brownsville and Henley, including a bridge over Slabtown Branch. Another implementation project was completing the Crozate Connector Trail, and that's been partially completed in terms of a primitive trail from the vicinity of Crozate Park to the Licking Hole Creek Reservoir, and includes construction of the bike ped tunnel under Eastern Avenue. In terms of Western Park being a priority implementation project, we'll have more details to share on that shortly, but the concept of having a joint funding structure between the county and developer was identified in 2010. And the importance of implementing the park plan according to community engagement, community feedback, and the updated master plan prepared by Anhold Associates in 2018. And Eastern Park was also one of the implementation projects contained in the 2010 plan. We'll have some discussion tonight on what park means in that particular circumstance or location, including information on how we understand different park typologies or categories of parks for the Crozate development area moving forward. Next slide, please. So in terms of those different typologies, you know, one of the more exciting things to touch on is the notion of a plaza as an urban park type. You know, an urban space that functions as the primary outdoor civic space for a community. These are often considered, you know, very special places that serve multiple functions and multiple uses for different people at different times, including just everyday, informal, decentralized individual uses, all the way up to programmed special events and markets or other planned public activities like festivals. An example of this park typology in Crozate is obviously the future planned Plaza at Barnes Lumber. And I'll have more information about that shortly. Next slide. Natural areas is another important park typology as a framework for thinking about, you know, park planning and management of public lands. And obviously this is an area that's developed less intensively, with fewer facilities, fewer amenities, and with the primary objective being environmental stewardship and conservation and sustainable management of the natural resources. In a natural area type park, the recreation experiences are typically passive and informal and prioritize contact with nature and providing respite from urban and suburban built environments. Great places for wildlife observation or otherwise, you know, seeing the textures and hearing the sounds of nature. An example of this would be Licking Hole Creek Reservoir, and also most of the Greenway areas in Crozate kind of serve this function or sort of meet this typology. Next slide, please, Rachel. And then recreation parks. This is a formally developed park typology, you know, all the facilities that are needed for recreation activities, typically including athletic fields and playgrounds, pavilions, and other developed facilities and amenities, including parking, which is not to be overlooked. And because these are more highly developed types of parks, recreation parks are also more easily able to accommodate special events like festivals or foot races, things like that. And the obvious example, you know, pictured here is Crozate Park. And then we don't have a slide for it, but I think there's almost a whole different typology for greenways, or what we consider linear parks. You know, we try to think of them and plan for them and manage them for more than just a trail corridor, but really it is about, you know, riparian conservation and wildlife corridors, in addition to being a place for recreational trails or other bike ped connectivity. Okay, next slide, please. And then this is the draft Parks and Greenways plan for the Crozate development area. And it shows the existing parks and greenways and trails, as well as potential future additions or extensions. You can see the individual parks and public spaces listed here, from, you know, Licking Hole Basin being something more like a natural area, to the Plaza at Barnes Lumber, of course, being more of that urban civic space that we envision. So in addition to the individual parks and public lands, you know, what's really just as important are the linear connections and the linear parks that connect all of these different sites and places. You know, there are two that really stand out. And of course, the Crozate connector is envisioned as an east-west greenway between downtown Crozate and the historic area, east to Licking Hole Basin, and kind of providing a thread of connectivity through all of the neighborhoods in between, and providing a gateway into or out of Crozate Park. The other important east-west connection, which is reflected in the public input commentary, is the Licking Hole Creek Greenway, in terms of you know, a connection across the entire development area from Licking Hole Basin west towards Western Park and Old Trail. And you know, in some ways there might be a need to jump out of Licking Hole Creek and make a connection along Slabtown Branch. But in some ways, we're just kind of referring to that as Licking Hole Creek Greenway as one of those major east-west connections in linear parks. So, you know, it's kind of just a simple vision of a parks and greenways system that provides safe, enjoyable opportunities to access public parklands of different typologies, places of commerce, and other neighborhoods on foot or by bicycle without a two-way vehicle trip being a necessary requirement. And we also want to provide vehicular access at the parks and other areas, knowing that that is a very important service to provide as well. Okay, next slide, please. So a couple more detailed updates in terms of greenways. These are images of the Crozate connector. On the left is an image at the corner of Crozate Park. This is an opportunity we see for enhancing the connection from the park down to the Crozate connector Greenway. If you're not familiar with Crozate or are a visitor, you might not even realize this is a place you're supposed to or allowed to go, let alone have an idea that, a community-wide Greenway is existing just down the hill. So there's an opportunity for signage, for other sort of gateway features or a ceremonial entrance between the park and the Greenway. So that's an opportunity, but in terms of implementation updates, there have been footbridges installed by the Crozate Trails crew. They maintain the Crozate connector trail that does exist today, the primitive trail, and a picture, of course, of the bike ped tunnel under Eastern Avenue. Next slide, Rachel. And then as far as an update and information about Western Park, just for background, in case anybody's not aware, Albemarle County does own about 36 acres that were conveyed to public use during the zoning and development of Old Trail. And Parks and Recreation staff and really everybody at the county recognizes the Crozate community's long-held expectations and the growing urgency to begin implementing the approved park master plan. And to that end, I can share that Parks and Recreation staff are pursuing a park development strategy that has multiple parallel phases. So we're continuing to work on a project scope and budget and timeline for a significant amount of park development that we're calling phase 1A. And that's primarily focused on providing park infrastructure, such as a vehicular entrance off Old Trail Drive and parking, stormwater management facilities, and bathroom facilities and the required water and electric utilities to service them, as well as landscaping and site furnishings and shelters or a pavilion. As we do that, we're approaching that phase 1A work in the interest of developing a partnership, or really multiple partnerships that would accelerate and enhance this phase, including the possibility of jointly developing portions of the park in partnership with one or more private developers, as well as responding to inquiries about the possibility of crowdfunding or crowdsourcing and establishing a transparent, secure method to accept any potential private contributions towards Western Park development. But simultaneously, as we're working on phase 1A, which has a lot of complexity to it and is getting clearer and closer, Parks and Rec staff are also finalizing project details to develop and deliver a relatively small initial phase, what we're calling phase 1ASAP. And to that end, county staff are preparing a request from the board to utilize the existing Old Trail proffer funds to install some amenities and facilities at Western Park as rapidly as possible, while continuing to push forward with the larger phase 1A coordination and development partnership and everything. The project scope for phase 1ASAP includes installation of new playground equipment, which would be similar in scale and quality to the new equipment that the county installed at Crozate Park last year. And we think it will include some limited amount of landscaping and signage and site furnishings, and possibly a small number of smaller shelters. And this excerpt from the approved park master plan shows the general area for phase 1A, where we're trying to develop a solution for park infrastructure. And then within that, the site of the more initial phase, where we think we can deliver certain amenities and facilities without having to figure out all of the engineering and the permitting process associated with the larger phase 1A, not to mention the funding and the partnership questions. So, you know, this is something that we're certainly interested in hearing feedback on, but the guiding principles for this parallel phase approach is to deliver new amenities for the public's benefit as soon as possible, while also continuing to work on solving the larger technical, logistical, and financial details of phase 1A. And our primary consideration with this is that opening Western Park relatively quickly, even if it's an incomplete and partially undeveloped state, is ultimately better than waiting longer for a more complete phase. Let's go ahead to the next slide and we can circle back to that later in the meeting, but updates on the plaza at Barnes Lumber and the square. You know, the plaza is one high profile outcome of the public-private partnership that the county formed with Frank Stoner and Crozate Newtown Associates. It's going to be a high quality public space. It's one of those, you know, central gathering urban amenities. And as most people on this meeting know, previous public engagement has resulted in a conceptual design for the plaza that you're seeing on your screen now. And more recently, ongoing collaborative effort between the developer and Downtown Crozate Initiative Organization and Albemarle County is focused on finalizing the design of the plaza. I'm not showing any of the sort of draft updated plans, which are really pretty moderate or minor modifications to what's shown here. But I do want to be clear that more information and more details and opportunity for public feedback are being scheduled for later this, well, for this spring, perhaps in April. So I think with that, we can go ahead to the draft recommendations. And as Rachel said, you know, these are pretty preliminary. Obviously, a lot of input and study has gone into preparing these, but we're certainly expecting and hoping for more feedback and commentary on these recommendations. So specifically for parks, you know, constructing Western Park in accordance with the approved park master plan, preserving Licking Hole Creek Reservoir and the surrounding area as a natural area with passive recreation opportunities and trails that are sensitive to important sites, such as the Bald Eagle Nest. Explore opportunities for new trailheads to increase access to pedestrian and bicycle connections throughout the Crozate development area. And a separate set of draft recommendations relating specifically to trails. Extend and upgrade the Crozate Connector Trail to an accessible connector route from downtown Crozate to West Hall, creating a multimodal route with a natural aesthetic that serves as the backbone of the Crozate development area. Improve signage, wayfinding, and connectivity from Claudia's Crozate Park to the Crozate Connector Trail, as shown on that slide with the recent image. Determine a safe and feasible alignment for a shared use path along Crozate Avenue to connect the Meadows apartments to the Crozate Connector Trail. Construct a sidewalk along the east side of Crozate Avenue, leveraging the county-owned right-of-way to connect to the Park Road area. Identify and support opportunities for north-south cyclist routes in the Crozate development area, including a southbound shared use path and northbound bicycle lane on Crozate Avenue. And as opportunities through new development proposals arise, continue to pursue connecting neighborhoods to trails through a network of shared use paths, sidewalks, and bicycle lanes. And some draft recommendations specific to the rural and regional amenities. Install signage along Mint Springs Road to create a rural shared road for both vehicular and cyclist traffic to formally connect the Crozate development area to Mint Springs Valley Park. Upgrade Jarman's Gap to a rural shared road and add signage to provide a formal connection to Bike Route 76 and provide signage directing cyclists using Bike Route 76 into downtown Crozate. So this is the time to share questions and comments for these draft recommendations.
Thanks, Tim. I see Anne's hand up, so we can start with you.
Thank you, and thank you, Tim. This is really great news, and I'm so excited, but you also pointed out about the intrinsic conflict in some of our things, and I'm thinking about Lick and Hole Basin particularly, and the reason that the eagle is there and the other very rare birds nest there is because there aren't hordes of people. So it's going to require a lot of effort on your part to figure out ways to keep the observers in a safe distance so that the wildlife can continue. I also think that there is still a research project underway to uncover more information about the Monacan settlement, which was there, and some materials from it, which are still preserved due to a rock slide and a flood from the railroad back 100 years ago. So there's a lot more. The remains of the burned structures and everything are still there, which is pretty amazing. And I think someone on staff, Siri, I think is working with the Monacan Nation to get more information about that, which is also very, very exciting. So I just wanted to encourage you. The Virginia Wildlife Birding Trail is part of what brings people from all across the state to see the basin, and it's in all the books and on all the maps. So we just need to take care of it. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Supervisor Malley.
Thanks, Anne. I think Sean and then Joe.
Hey, Tim, thanks for the presentation, and really would love to see so much of this in place, and I know everyone else would be. If I could add maybe some forward-looking, aggressive, even a more aggressive ideas when it comes to connection. What I would really love to see, since we have some great water resources, both in Mint Springs and Beaver Creek, is a way to extend the true off-road option of walking from everything you described with a connector trail, but all the way to Mint Springs going west, not on a road somehow, and then all the way east to Beaver Creek. I've often thought that Parrot Creek is kind of a unknown and untapped natural sort of east-west route by Crozate Elementary, which could connect kind of the Star Hill area and the developments on 240, and then continue it down to Beaver Creek somehow, because there is kind of a neat, not a full loop of Beaver Creek, but a partial loop, maybe a full loop on Beaver Creek would be nice. But so you could literally walk from downtown Crozate and all these great neighborhoods with the connector trail, but get out to Mint Springs going west and out to Beaver Creek going east. Now that's a real connected community with its green spaces. So since this is a vision document, I would like to see that included.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sean. And I think that's the right level of ambition to connect, ultimately, you know, downtown Crozate and Mint Springs Park. And I know that's kind of a long-held vision or dream. You know, I think Powell's Creek has been identified as one of those potential routes to get from the center of Crozate up towards Mint Springs. That is one of the updates that I can share tonight is that the county is working with Stanley Martin on their easement plat, and it looks like there will be a Greenway connection obtained in the relatively near future as part of their development of Pleasant Green. So that's a piece of the puzzle. It's just one piece, but it's an important and really great piece moving in that direction.
Great, thanks Tim, thanks Sean. Go ahead, Joe.
Thanks, Allie, and thanks, Tim. This was a great presentation, a lot of good stuff in there. Just one idea going all the way back to the very beginning of the presentation with and this is from, I think, Rachel's part on the conservation goals and the sort of the guiding principles at the very beginning. I just want to throw in one idea to add. I don't think I saw the word, in terms of conservation, I don't believe I saw the word view sheds. You know, we talked about like natural beauty and all that, but I know view sheds are a very important thing out here. And maybe trying to find some way to specifically work that in, right? Because natural beauty is fine. We drive and we look, but maintaining view sheds, and especially as that, I know a lot of us are concerned how that butts up against land use and development. And so finding a way to work that while we are conserving plants and water and soil, conserving our views of those mountains and all those things. So just a suggestion there. Second, Tim, your point about Western Park, I was very heartened. I think this one ASAP, aside from being very clever, is just great. I think, you know, going back to even, you know, what Ali and some of us have said on the transportation side, these incremental steps, these interim things that we can do, I think is always better than nothing. And so I think that, speaking for myself, I think that would be terrific, especially if it can be some sort of access, as you mentioned, just something as simple as signage, access, wayfinding, so people who are coming to the park know exactly, you know, what's going on. Whatever we can do to get people into the park quicker, I think is good. And then the last point I'll just make is, one of the other things I want to just sort of voice some support for the recommendation about trailhead access and how important that is. Speaking as someone who's in the Highlands, all the way on the east side, it is very difficult for us to access that trail. And so realistically, right, what I have to do if I go to the trail, I got to drive somewhere. And so usually that means going into, you know, Western Ridge and kind of going in that cul-de-sac there and accessing it, but it's just hard to find a way to get into the trail. So, you know, I know we've talked a little bit before. There have been some suggestions about maybe trying to find a place like on Crozate Avenue, you know, somewhere near where that bridge is, if there's some way to create some, I mean, I drive by that little that little lot where all the construction vehicles always park along. And I always think like, that's a perfect spot for a parking lot for a trailhead where people could stop and access the trails, but some vehicular access to some trailheads where people can go and park and then access the trails.
Thanks, Joe. Those are great comments, especially your insight on the value of incremental, you know, access and incremental development. That's helpful from staff perspective to hear that kind of feedback.
All right, thanks. I see Brian, and we had 2 hands up or 3 in the attendees. So I'll go Brian, and then we can unmute some people with Carolyn. Thanks.
I just want to be real brief, but I want to echo both Sean's. This is a master plan. Let's look at the big picture, east and west, and connecting up to Crozate Elementary. I think he's just dead on, and I think we should be calling for that in the master plan, even if we haven't figured out all of the if, ands, and hows. And then secondly, what Joe just said, let's incrementally make the steps that we can do. So nice presentation, add even yet a bigger view. We don't know where all the money is going to come from. We don't know where all the right of way is going to come from, but let's see if we can't begin everybody's thinking about it when they see the master plan. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. I think, Carolyn, maybe you were watching, but I think I saw Mike's hand up first, or Terry, you can go first, whichever.
Okay, am I on?
Raise their hand.
Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, hi. Thanks, Tim. We're so excited. We want to go out and build all those trails and those bridges, as you know. But my question is about Bike Route 76, because I do a lot of biking around here. And north of Crozate on 810 scares me so much. I've had some bad experiences on there. I don't bike that anymore. Is there any thought about rerouting Bike Route 76 to Crozate on Jarman's Gap, taking advantage of that bike lane that's been built, and then through hopefully Park Ridge, you know, because that road should be finished pretty soon, then out to 3-notched out through Beaver Creek to Garth Road that way. I just think, number one, it takes us off 810, which I just think is more dangerous than 3-notched, really. And number two, it brings Bike Route 76 right through the business area of Crozate. So it gives people the advantage of free internet if they sit outside the library, or an ice cream cone or a beer if they want to go by Star Hill or something like that. I'm just wondering if that would be like a better route for Bike Route 76.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I mean, that's a good question, and I haven't studied it. I know the Thomas Jefferson PDC prepared a pretty in-depth study of that bike route. Although, in general, I think the goals you identified are fantastic. You know, I think bringing it through downtown Crozate makes sense, and being a trail town is a legitimate economic development strategy, and it's something that benefits residents too. So it's worth studying and exploring further, especially if it eliminates, you know, a hazardous or a dangerous section.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Terry. And I think if Tim has it on his radar, then when there's an opportunity to work together with the Thomas Jefferson, whatever the rest of their name is, you know, we can advocate for that for Crozate. So we've got Matt, and then we'll get to Mike and Caroline.
Yeah, thank you. So my first comment, and I've got a series of comments and questions, is that parks should not be dependent upon development. And I think that's an inherent flaw, is that the county is using development as a way to pay for parks. You know, for those of us who've been here for a long time, we've been paying taxes, and we had a great park system that was easily accessible, affordable, and provided ample opportunity for kids, even if it was a cinder block swimming pool when we grew up. So I think that tying any future development to, or any future park development to residential or commercial development is a flawed plan from the beginning. And I hope that the county looks at another source for developing those parks. Also, so there seems to be a significant overlap between the green network, parks, and existing sensitive environmental features, floodplain, steep slopes. So I'd like to see an overlay of those two to show park areas outside of sensitive environmental areas, i.e. the creeks. For those of us who live along the creeks, we already have enough trash and debris coming from Crozate onto our properties, and I haven't seen the county do anything to mitigate that as it is. So I'd hate to have additional stuff flowing onto our properties for us to clean up. Also, when you look at developing trails, sustainable trails are not developed in floodplains. You generally want to bring it out of that area because it increases your cost of development, maintenance, operations through the life of the plan. As I see now, the county doesn't provide any significant funding for trails or trails crews. Most of it's volunteer. I'd be hesitant for the county to continue to pursue trails in unsustainable locations. Let's see, you talked about the recreation opportunity spectrum. I'd like to see a Ross map of Crozate, including trail class, design use, manage use for those trails, those connector systems. Let's see, I would like to see the county look at developing pocket parks in older neighborhoods. I've emailed the county numerous times about the development on St. George. There's one lot left. Kids on this part of town do not have any access to any parklands in Crozate because of the inability of the community and VDOT, or the county and VDOT, to build connections via bike ped from our neighborhood. And I think it's sad that the county hasn't been able to accomplish that. I even suggested using the new funding mechanism the state of Virginia was offering earlier this year to pay for the acquisition of those lands. Didn't hear back from the county. Also, I would like to see what the county is planning on doing at the Eastern Avenue, I believe, connector. The community there has installed some basketball hoops. The kids have a nice basketball court. What are you all planning to do to replace that infrastructure for those kids in that neighborhood?
Cool. All right. Thanks, Matt. It's a lot for you guys to take down. So I don't know if Tim, you want to respond, or we can.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, Matt, for providing those comments. I think there's a lot of important things you touched on in terms of sustainable trail planning and management. We do certainly try to keep that in the forefront of our minds. A lot of times these social trails are already along the creeks and creek bottoms. It's kind of a natural corridor through the other land uses. But your points are well taken, certainly, in terms of planning and installing and maintaining them in sustainable ways. I've also noticed, you know, at certain times in certain locations, trash collecting along some of the creek bottoms, and you know, that's a concern, and it's something we can look at more carefully, more closely. And yeah, I mean, you provided a lot of good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mike.
Hi, thanks. I saw that you guys, first of all, great job on the presentations and very interesting approach to the master plan. Glad to see that the trails and the connections are getting the recognition they need. I think it's one of the things that really would help Crozate if it can get connected back to front and sort of up and down. So north to south and east to west. Along those lines, I saw one thing that said that any future developments, it would be great if they could think about trails or think about connectors. And I'm just wondering if we could get a little stronger about that and say, you know, any future developments have to, you know, factor in creating connections and creating trails so that they, you know, they contribute to this whole idea as opposed to get in the middle of it. Just a suggestion.
Thanks, Mike. I don't, maybe one of you guys to know how much the county already encourages that more, you know, specifically with developers. Is that kind of language already included?
Our development process, if there's a legislative approval, meaning the board has to approve a rezoning or a special use leeway to get new trails and trail systems. If development comes in by right under the existing zoning, have the leverage to require trails, we certainly encourage, and we can point out, hey, really close, you could build a connection. And a lot of times developers are willing to do that. Sometimes they're not.
Thanks, yeah. All right, we've got Caroline next.
Thank you. So I'm new to these meetings and maybe this has been covered in a previous meeting, but what I wanted to emphasize is Ann Malik's point about birds and biodiversity. I wanted to say that if you look on the eBird website, it talks about the 150 hotspots in Albemarle County. The top 2 in Albemarle County hotspots for bird biodiversity are in Crozate. Number 1, Licking Hole Creek, 194 species. Number 2, Old Trade Golf Course, which is your Western Park, 188. And so what I'm asking is, as you plan the development for Western Park, if you can talk to people who know every bush in that area and where the birds go and work with those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. That's really cool to hear those numbers. And I appreciate your comment. We can go to Clover. Hi, Clover.
Hello. I'm in the Crozate. I'm a member of the Crozate Trails crew, but I just have a quick question. I live near Matt on St. George Avenue East, and my question ties with what he said. You mentioned an Eastern Park in your presentation and the map, but I didn't see it on the map. Can you show me where that Eastern Park is planned? That's an exciting concept to me.
Thanks, Clover.
Yeah, we can look at that. Rachel, was that on the 2010 Parks and Green Systems plan?
Yes, it was.
And Clover,
it's difficult to see on this map. It's pretty low resolution.
Well, as you pull that up, Rachel, I can try to answer your question, Clover. Yeah, it's sort of at the eastern end of the Crozate Connector Trail near the Licking Hole Basin.
You see my cursor? I'm circling it. Okay.
Yep.
And then I can show our updated map if that might be helpful as well.
Yeah,
So it's this area. Here's Licking Hole Basin. So it was previously shown over here. And so Tim, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, the current thinking is that would be not so much a formal recreation area with athletic fields or playgrounds or that type of a park, but closer to the natural area park typology or just simply Greenway park typology, in terms of primarily being about environmental stewardship and, you know, low impact trails, multi-use trails.
And did you have a comment on that?
More of a question that someone can answer when they have the information. Is this basically the wide floodplain just south of Westlake? And what is where the Eastern Avenue Bridge is going to go across to Corey Farms? I mean, there's a beautiful open area down there, and lots of it, I think, is not able to be built on, thankfully. So it may be a place where some enterprising landowner would be generous to be able to pass it on to us. So if I have the location right, then I think that's exciting. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know exactly where that is, but that's generally accurate to me, Anne.
I think the area shown as Eastern Park on the 2010 plan is a few neighborhoods east of the Eastern Avenue connection and Corey Farms.
Okay.
I think there's a bit of a gap there.
So how would you access it?
Well, you know, if you see the current draft recommendation, we're not really recommending the development of a park in that location due to environmental sensitivity and constraints, you know, and an emphasis on developing park facilities elsewhere.
Okay. But someday the connector trail might go further east, south of the Highlands and to connect up through the, somewhere in the shrubbery down there. Because I know it's a very popular place to go down and see the stream and that kind of thing, so.
Okay. I don't see any more hands up. Does anybody else have anything?
Yeah. Can I speak?
Yeah, you can still talk, Clover.
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that question, I would like to just second Matt's encouragement of planning for a park on the eastern side of the growth area for children. That's all.
Thanks. We'll take note of that. We'll talk about that as a team. Thank you, Clover.
Thanks. So where are we at? Is that it? Are we done?
We have one more. Sorry, we're not done yet.
Okay.
We have one more section to cover. Okay. Tori's gonna lead that piece.
All right, everyone. So now we're going to go ahead and transition to our final topic and related set of recommendations, which includes sensitive environmental resources, stream health, and biodiversity. And so for these draft recommendations, we coordinated with other staff, including engineering, facilities and environmental services, natural resources, and parks and recreation. So to cover the definitions of some of these important environmental features that helped kind of inform our recommendations, the county has ordinances that regulate the preservation and potential disturbances of these features, as well as water quality and stormwater management. Chapter 17 of the county's ordinances is the Water Protection Ordinance, or WPO, and it regulates construction activities, stormwater management, erosion and sediment control, and stream buffers. These regulations are authorized by the state of Virginia, and their purpose is to protect water from unmanaged stormwater, protect property and natural resources, and reduce pollution to protect water quality. So the WPO lists two types of streams. An intermittent stream tends to only have flowing water after a significant rainfall event. And then perennial streams tend to always have flowing water unless there are abnormally dry conditions. And in the county, stream buffers are required for all perennial streams, and they're required for both perennial and intermittent streams in water supply watersheds. And since Crozate is within one of those watersheds, all streams have a 100-foot buffer on each side of the stream. And this buffer increases to 200 feet if there's a floodplain within a water supply watershed. Portions of streams that are piped do not have buffers around that piped portion. And for these buffers, maintaining native plantings is the ideal condition. And replanting and restoration efforts can help improve existing streams where there was already structures of development that might have existed prior to enhanced buffer regulations. And new buildings like residential and commercial buildings cannot be located within these buffers. So the county zoning ordinance also includes a flood hazard overlay district, which regulates uses and land disturbance within the 100-year floodplain. For example, some recreational, public utility, and agricultural uses are permitted within the floodplain, while most structures like homes and businesses would not be permitted. And the purpose of the overlay is to protect community members, property, and prevent potentially costly repairs. The zoning ordinance also includes a steep slopes overlay district, which regulates the disturbance of identified steep slopes, which include all slopes in the county that are 25% or greater. And in the development area, there are two types of steep slopes. Preserved slopes are often around sensitive environmental features, such as stream banks, and they can only be disturbed with a special use permit. And then managed slopes are often man-made and not associated with sensitive areas and can be disturbed by right. In the rural area, all slopes, steep slopes are critical steep slopes, and they can only be disturbed with a special exception. And the disturbance of these slopes should be limited in order to protect downstream areas from the potential negative effects of disturbance, such as erosion and stormwater runoff, and then preserve the character and scenic nature of these slopes. So this map shows those definitions now applied to the Crozate development area. The stream buffers are shown in blue, the floodplain in a hatched blue, which is within the buffers, and then preserved slopes shown in that orange color. And these, of course, include many passive and recreation areas, as was talked about, such as parks and trails. And these features also were used to inform the draft green network, which we'll be showing on a following slide. So we also wanted to cover some of the streams that have already been talked about and mention those that have been identified as impaired. So Licking Hole Creek, shown along here going east to west, and then Parrot Branch up here going east to west on the northern side, Crozate Avenue, have been identified as impaired. And the EPA identifies streams that are impaired, meaning that they're not safely able to be used for certain purposes, or they're not meeting certain standards for species and their habitats. For example, Licking Hole Creek has been identified as impaired for aquatic life. And the State Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ, also monitors stream health and is currently working with the county on a study for the South Fork of the Ravenna River and related watersheds. Therefore, it includes watershed areas for Crozate, Hollymead, and a significant portion of the rural area. So this study is evaluating the total maximum daily load, or TMDL, of pollutants, which establishes the maximum amount of pollutants allowed in a body of water and serves as the starting point for finding a plan forward for restoring water quality. And the TMDL should be formalized later this year or early next year, and may include additional measures to reduce the amount of pollution reaching streams, including through stormwater management projects and stream restorations. So putting a lot of that together, we have our draft green network for Crozate, intended to reflect these sensitive environmental features, habitat connectivity, and areas with enhanced biodiversity and tree canopy. So these include the parks and trails in Crozate and previously identified stream buffers and floodplain. And it includes opportunities for connectivity, both for habitats and then walkability and access for community members. And I just wanted to point out too, that might be a little hard to see on here, but the trail connections are not proposed to go way out to the east where the bald eagle's nest is. So there would not be people walking trails over there on that sensitive site. And this network is intended to support the draft recommendations for the conservation chapter for this master plan, which we'll cover in the following slides. And the recommendations are also intended to support and align with the county's biodiversity action plan. So this plan was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 2018 and is part of the county's comprehensive plan. It identifies priority natural sites and areas for preserving habitat connectivity. And these priority sites and areas were identified based on factors such as the size and connectivity of habitats and forest blocks, sites identified by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the presence of wetlands, steep bluffs, wooded riparian areas, or uncommon species. And while most of the sites identified are within the rural area, the plan does also identify a priority site at Licking Hole Basin in Crozate and identifies a small forest block around the basin and the potential for enhanced riparian connectivity along Licking Hole Creek, going from the basin over to Crozate Avenue. And the plan's recommendations also include a variety of goals and actions for the stewardship of publicly owned land, such as including requiring the use of native plant species and also ensuring trails avoid disturbing sensitive habitats. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Rachel to cover those draft recommendations.
Thanks, Tori. So that was, as Tori said, we have several initiatives or policies already in the county that are about, how we preserve natural resources. And so we've pulled that together to guide some of these, as well as the feedback we've heard so far through this process, to draft a couple of recommendations about natural resources. Tori, if you go to the next slide. So the first one's about tree canopy and its importance of protecting natural resources in our water system. And so really making sure we're preserving tree canopy, especially within these green systems that Tori pointed out. The second one is related to actually some feedback we already heard in this discussion about the importance of biodiversity and natural resources in some of the areas of Crozate, especially Licking Hole Creek Reservoir, and making sure we're being careful about where we site trails and providing information for people who use those resources. The third recommendation relates to one of the impaired streams that Tori pointed out, Parrot Branch. It runs between St. George Avenue and Railroad Avenue, and this is a historic area of Crozate where all the homes were built prior to our current stream buffer guidance and regulations. And so that portion of stream is through backyards and mowed areas, and several of the houses are within what would traditionally be in a wooded buffer along our streams. And so recommending a study of this area to see if there are some strategies we can do to help restore the health of this stream, to allow these houses and yards to exist the way they are today. So it wouldn't be your traditional buffer, but perhaps some other creative solutions to help the stream health of that area. And the next slide has a few more. The next recommendation is about reducing mowing in our publicly owned properties where we can. Certainly we're not going to stop mowing on our fields and things, but if there are areas of our public parks and properties where we can reduce mowing and encourage more natural gardens and meadows to help with biodiversity. Next, as opportunities arise through development and private initiated public projects, removing invasive species in our stream buffers and floodplains. And then lastly, as new county-owned parks and trails are constructed, leveraging opportunities for installing interpretive signs, education signage, and wayfinding signage to identify some of these important resources within Crozate. So that concludes our recommendations. We'll pause here. Questions and the natural resources portion.
I might have missed something. Did we hire a consultant with regard to these wildlife corridors? How do we know about those areas? Is that just sort of observation, or is there actually some data?
Have a natural resources planner, staff person, and we also have a natural heritage committee that did quite a bit of work to develop a biodiversity action plan, and they identified several of these sites.
Yeah, and who's the staff person?
Currently, Kim Biazioli. She was preceded by David Hanna, who actually worked on that plan, but he's since retired.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Sandy. I see one hand up. I don't know if anybody else on the committee has something. We can go to Matt.
Am I good? Oh, okay. I'm just curious, the name of Parrot Branch, I believe that's an unnamed creek according to USGS maps. Was that creek named, or are we calling it a tributary of Parrot Branch? Because if you look at USGS maps, Parrot Branch is going to be running near Crozate School, not between St. George and Crozate Avenue.
I think I'll have to check on that. I don't, but I do believe you might, that portion, at least on our GIS, isn't shown with a name. Just in conversations we've had with our internal staff that work on stream health initiatives, they identified Parrot Branch, but I think you might be correct. It's a tributary. But I would like to confirm.
Yeah, my father has proposed naming that Crozate Creek because it both starts and ends in Crozate. We think it's an aptly named, we've much better named with Crozate Creek, not Parrot Branch tributary.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
But also I would suggest looking at alternatives for interpretive signage. For anyone who's in Parks and Recreation Development, interp signs are very expensive, become damaged quickly, are outdated. With mobile technology, and I'm not saying that signs aren't a good thing, but there are plenty of apps the county could use for the park system that would work exceptionally well on Cell, or I think they've changed their name to Story or something like that. Is a much better alternative. Also, I'd love to see an Avenza geo-referenced map for all of the trails so that people could have an Avenza map on their phone and be out there and know exactly where they are and what's going on. And then I would like to know a little bit more about what the county said was Parrot Branch. It was highlighted as impaired. That's the one that I've indicated. We pick up tons of trash out of it every year. What is the county planning on doing to fix that? It was highlighted in purple.
As Tori pointed out, we're going through the process of developing that plan right now. It's called the TMDL, or Total Maximum Daily Load Plan, and we're working with the state on that plan. They do, and as far as I understand, it's there's public engagement opportunities as part of that planning effort. So if the committee's interested, we can find out more information about that process and share it with you all.
Oh, yeah, that might be interesting. I see Clover and Anne.
Just a quick comment. I believe that Parrot Branch runs behind the houses on the north side of St. George Avenue, over under Crozate Avenue, between the school and our properties. That's where Parrot Branch is. Not down by Railroad Avenue. Yeah, that's all. I've looked at maps before.
Thank you. That is correct. We've since looked at the map. So this is a tributary to Parrot Branch.
Okay.
Sorry for misspeaking on that.
Thanks. Go ahead, Anne.
So my clarification was, I understand about the little channels, basically behind the Dairy Queen, all through that neighborhood, that go then under Crozate Avenue and next to the rescue squad, and then goes all the way down to Beaver Creek. So that may have a name and it may not have a name, but that's what came to mind when someone was talking about trails to Beaver Creek, that source. So it may run into the proper Parrot Branch somewhere down there on the racetrack area or something like that. So something like that. Costas may know what it's called. I don't.
Matt, did you want to respond to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct. If we could change the name to Crozate Creek, the Dairy Queen, my father was adamant when that was developed that they actually install the filtration system there that's at the corner of the parking lot so that there's not as much crap that gets down into the creek. And then that's the creek that was heavily polluted by the Save-A-Lot gas station leak that used to be there next to the IGA. And then, Ann, you are correct. It does, there's a little pond where Parrot Branch and, if we could call it, Crozate Creek meet, and that's near the intersection with Halcon Drive, behind the vet.
Okay, great.
Oh, good info.
Thank you.
Mike?
So I have a quick question about maps. So, and I heard it mentioned today. So one of the things you'll see on a map is that Corey Farm is referred to as Corey Farms in a plural sense. This is not a big deal, but it's Corey Farm. And so my question is, you know, as we work on the master plan and how things are represented, is that something that can be changed, or maybe even somebody knows why it's referred to on maps in such a way? So I know I've had a couple of folks in the neighborhood ask me about that. So anyway, just a question.
That is pulled from our GIS, Geographic Information System, that pulls from plats and property records. So I'm not quite sure the process for updating that. I'd have to check with our real estate folks, but I'd be happy to look into that for you.
Okay, good. Oh, thank you. That's it.
Cool. And
just one other thing, and that is the challenge of having our GIS be completely accurate is monumental. It's been an evolving thing for decades. So all of us, when we see street, you should check your own maps on our county GIS. And if you have a stream which doesn't appear, then letting the staff know that, to say, look, the stream is never dry, it should be a blue line stream, you know, they can verify that and get it corrected. And this information is important because they rely on the maps as a resource when decisions are being made about setbacks and all sorts of technical things, stormwater, et cetera. So everybody with their backyards and things, just try to proof your own materials and speak up if you find things that don't match. Thanks.
good. Yeah, thanks, Ann. I appreciate that. I think we all should take care of do our part in the community, and that includes things like names and streams. So that's cool. All right, Rachel, do you guys have anything else?
No, that's all we prepared this evening. I'll just remind you all our next meeting will be on the 10th, and we will come back with land use at that meeting.
Yeah, so we had a few minutes here for saved for committee business, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of the staff members present and who have worked on this so far, and really appreciate you responding to our concerns last time and adding this March meeting about land use. That is really encouraging, and I appreciate it. And I don't know if anybody else in the committee has, this is sort of items not on the agenda, or anything you want to add while we're actually in the meeting where we're not running out of time. So speak now. The floor is open. And if not, we'll go ahead. Yeah.
Just one update from the legislature. There is several people, Sandy Hausman and many others actually for years have been trying to help us concentrate on the tree preservation ordinance, which we don't have much, and we don't have much authority either to require a greater percentage. So there has been legislative effort 2 years in a row to give us more authority to be able to require more things. Unfortunately, this time it was sent to a study. So it isn't dead. It just was sent to a study for the summer. And we're very hopeful that it will come out of that study with some really good operating features that we can use. And so don't hold your breath, but we're making progress, I think, on that. It's incredibly important. And I was out walking today in a place where there were just 4-foot diameter trees that were just so magnificent. And I thought, boy, it'd be criminal for somebody to come in there and whack those down. So we have to really have, do more thoughtful things. And hopefully the General Assembly will help us this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, they have, I was thinking about that when Tim showed that picture, that aerial photo of Crozate Park and how different it looks. It looks like that picture was maybe from last year, and it already looks a lot different as far as tree cover at Crozate Park. So thanks for bringing that up, Anne and Sandy. Anything else? I have Mike, you want to go ahead and I can get Brad?
Yes, a quick question. So I think we're coming up on term renewals.
Oh yeah, I
want that going before the board. So I don't know if you had an update or any word on that.
Yes, that was actually, I forgot to bring that up. We've got John is done. He has finished his 3rd term. And then Sean, Tom, and Mike, we are up, and myself, we are up for renewal. For what will be all 4 of our 3rd term. So yeah, everybody can serve 3 2-year terms. So that I think it would be interesting to hear from Sean. I applied to stay on. Mike, what's your plan?
Oh, need to unmute. Yeah, I plan to apply again. Yep.
Good. And Sean?
I'm still holding some focus groups on the issue, and okay. I'm still having fun. Why not?
Okay, and then Tom, are you re-upping?
Still thinking.
Okay. And then I guess we'll have to talk about what do you call it? Chair, vice chair, secretary. It's already been a year, amazingly. I feel like we just talked about this. Maybe it was late last year with COVID, but yeah, well, I don't know if somebody wants to, what did we do last time? I guess if you want to be, somebody wants to take my position, volunteer and send a message to Anne. And then we've still got Sean. Your duties have been light as vice chair.
Are you willing to continue, Allie?
I am willing to continue.
Yay.
So
you guys will have me.
So maybe one idea would be, in just thinking of succession, if someone would be interested in following Allie a year from now, that I would gladly stand down as vice chair, and someone who maybe has an aspiration, Joe, to take over would be well suited to sort of be the vice chair for the coming year.
Look, if it gets me out of typing these minutes, I'll do whatever.
Yeah, and we'll need to know if Joe is willing to continue doing secretary duties, which I have really appreciated. You can say next month. We can see if anybody wants to volunteer. That's
I will tell you, it's a lot easier now that we record these meetings. If you miss anything, it's a lot easier to go back and see.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the county's plan is when we are back in person, but it seems like, this could be the infrastructure might be there to keep posting recordings. But yeah, I don't see us meeting in person too soon, maybe by the fall or something, but it seems like it'll be a pretty easy job for a little while longer. But yeah, I guess this is just fair warning that we'll have to have that on the March agenda too, just taking care of these. And I agree, I can keep being chair, but not once I'm not on the committee anymore. So someone will have to take over, and I would, you know, probably a good idea to be thinking about that. So I guess we'll, depending on what Tom decides, then we have at least John's spot to fill. So if anybody, I don't know if Ann, you've gotten any applications, but we'll have an opening for anybody who's watching and might want to join us, or and we'll have some spots. Brad, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, while we're on the topic of trees, I just was going to see, can anybody shed light on what Penn Line is doing down at Oak Drive and Crozate Avenue?
I have no idea.
All that clearing?
Where on?
South of Oak Drive.
By the cemetery. Bridge. Yeah, well, there's, I didn't know if that was related to, there's that infill development. It was in the Gazette. I don't know.
Close to the creek for that.
Yeah, I didn't know if the clearing was related to that or related to the bridge replacement that is coming up right there. Do you, Ann, know what that is? They've cleared some.
I don't know, but I will find out. Yeah. I had been down the street in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's been a lot of machines and tree. I mean, yeah, some of it's.
Are they still going to replace that bridge tit for tat, the same bridge that's there now?
Something like that in 2023.
2023.
So we have a little time to get the Eastern Avenue Bridge done first, which will save us all.
That would be ideal.
And the 240 shared use path planned for.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All righty, thanks.
Is Tim? No, he's not. Here he is. I don't know, Tim, if you're still here. On one of the maps you were talking about.
And I don't know. Your audio is messed up. I don't know if that's just me. But.
I'll save it.
Okay. Matt, can we unmute Matt again?
Yeah, I stopped to talk to Penn Line today. I actually dropped the wood chippings off at our property. The Dominion has been asked to move their power lines for the realignment of the bridge. I guess the bridge is not going in the exact location. They're going to straighten out that road a little bit, is what the Penn Line folks said. So it's for prep for Dominion to relocate.
Cool. All right, good to know. All right, good information. I am done. So last call for any comments. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to give maybe Ann and the board a chance to brag a little bit about their work. I think, Ann, am I right that at one of the most recent meetings, the Crozate Elementary expansion funding got approved?
Yay.
It's actually in the current year as opposed to the July 2021. It was reactivated from its pause when the COVID hit. So very, very big deal for us. Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. I know it's been a big thing, you know, obviously with Penn City and development. So it's exciting news that that's going forward.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's good. All right, well, thanks everybody, and we'll see each other in 1 month, and I will read what I have to read. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for March 10th at 7 p.m. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted at a later date in accordance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A16 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. So if you're not getting notices, let me know. I will put you on the list. And it's always posted on the Albemarle County calendar. which is really helpful. That's where you can also find the presentations and agenda. It's really, really nice to have those all in one spot. So I appreciate you guys getting those up, and hope everybody has a nice evening, and see you next month. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.